Bozeman's average temperature has already risen 11 degrees on average in the last 100 years and will continue to rise without serious effort to combat climate change. This temperature change drastically affects agriculture in Bozeman. This also affects many people's livelihoods and limits the ability to feed Montana communities. The temperature increase will likely affect many other things in Bozeman, as well as the tourism industry and general health of the population. Not to mention, people in places experiencing more climate change will continue to move here and create urbanization challenges. Like every other industrialized area, Bozeman needs to start implementing carbon neutral policies and energy infrastructures. Advancement in nuclear energy technology makes nuclear require minimal rare minerals, minimal water, relatively small facilities, and a promising choice for transitioning to a carbon neutral and livable future. This begs the question, how will the intersection of politics and technology surrounding nuclear energy result in the future of nuclear energy? We asked nuclear engineer Emma Redfoot this question, and she answered with an analysis of nuclear politics, economics, and scale.
First one is, um, what do you think nuclear will look like in 50 years in the US?
That's a very good question. I mean, our energy infrastructure is changing dramatically no matter what. One thing I'm really excited about is that we're moving to, and really you can thank solar and wind for this, is that we're moving to smaller systems that are more dispersed. Ultimately, that means you have a more reliable grid because you have like a bunch of interconnected microgrids, and those microgrids can detach from the larger grid if, like, say there's like a tree that goes down on the larger grid, or squirrels, which honestly those are the two main reasons that we have blackouts. But that means like a microgrid can detach and kind of be its own standalone grid and provide power. So nuclear, like, there's no really good reason for why nuclear went so big. And nuclear power plants around the country are so big, like in terms of power output, in terms of land usage and all that stuff, they're tiny. But I see the future of nuclear in the United States as being one of the tools that works well with, solar, wind, and hydro, geothermal. And this is my like ideal world in smaller grids. And so the reactors are smaller, and they're used for a bunch of different things, hopefully. So not just for electricity production, but also for industrial process heat uses. So those are kind of the things that I hope happen. Energy infrastructure changes slower than people want it to, than anybody wants it to. And so I don't think, but fast, like the coal phase out has been incredibly fast. And so like there's some really hopeful stuff out there. But yeah, I think that I actually think we'll probably have a good amount of natural gas on the grid still at that point, unfortunately, because we're just continuing to build natural gas plants right now. And that means we're investing in expensive infrastructure on natural gas right now. So it's going to be around in 30 years, most likely, I think, unfortunately.
What are the political hurdles that need to be overcome in the near future in order for nuclear to progress?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. Nuclear has interesting stuff. It's actually politically very popular. I know this is a weird statement. It's not public perception popular, but if you look at the federal government, and you look at the like past, like 10 years, different bills that have been passed, like the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act or the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act, there's been a bunch of things passed, and they're intending to be pro nuclear. They're intending to support nuclear, and they passed like 83-3 in the Senate. Like these are not like controversial bills at all, and so it's weirdly got a lot of federal support. The things that I think are holding back, that are weird about nuclear or difficult about nuclear, are really more of a discussion about energy in general in this country. We don't have energy policy in this country. Have you heard that statement at all? And so, like, we don't have that in this country. Nuclear is actually the only one it's the only energy industry that pays for its regulator. So nuclear pays for 90% of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's budget. It's also the only one that has like has a regulator, really, like has a distinct regulator, while the coal and wind and solar really have the environmental the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So nuclear, like, I think that having it so that there's equal playing grounds for all these energy sources, that like they all need to pay for their regulator and they all need to pay for their waste, would be one thing, and that includes carbon emissions. So I actually think that the most important policy to get for nuclear in the near term is to somehow value it for its clean energy quality. And so, I work in advanced nuclear, and I will advocate that for days. But the most urgent thing is we keep shutting down nuclear plants right now. It's happening across the country. They just shut down some in New York right before there was a big energy crisis there. And every time we shut down nuclear plants, they're replaced with natural gas. And so, what the Biden infrastructure bill does is it gives a little bit of money to existing plants to value them for their clean energy quality. The infrastructure bill that did not pass, I believe, today, but doing something like that, renewables got a lot more money than nuclear. I think renewables got $22 per megawatt hour, and nuclear got $3. So, it's not the same, but, doing something that supports existing nuclear to have it continue, like the easiest way to have clean energy is to not shut it down.
If there are any policies in other states that are really good that Montana could implement?
Yeah, there's some great policies in other states. So New York actually has a good policy on this that's called zero emission credits. So, there's the renewable energy credits that a lot of states have done, but New York, Illinois, Ohio's been looking into this, have put into place zero emission. Oh, and New Jersey have put into place zero emission credits. And those are they work the same as renewable, but they include nuclear. And it's weird, of course, in our language, we use the term renewable to mean clean, but instead focusing on clean energy, the ultimate goal, which is to not have emissions. And so, yeah, so those are good policies. The reason why that nuclear plant still shut down in New York with the zero emission credit process is that they specifically left that nuclear plant out because the governor at the time did not like it. Him and his dad both had a legacy of trying to shut down that nuclear plant. Indian Point is the name of the nuclear plant. The reason around it was because it's 45 miles outside of New York City. So I can go into why that's a stupid reason to shut down a nuclear plant, but I'll just, that was the reasoning behind, it saved 3 of their upstate plants and got votes for the governor from those upstate communities, and then they shut down the one that was actually the largest source of emissions-free energy in their state. So cool.
Kind of the capacities of nuclear lobbyists. Is there a policy that you would draw up yourself in order to best help nuclear?
Yeah, I'll first answer the lobbying thing, and then I'll go into this. One thing that's kind of interesting to me about nuclear that we don't talk about is okay, so the lobbyists for oil and gas, they're really the extraction people. So it's the people Exxon, it's the BP, they're the groups that extract oil and gas out of the earth and coal. They're the big lobbying groups. Nuclear, uranium, you require 3 million times less of it. So energy density of uranium is 3 million times as high as coal. So you just don't need that much of it. And so uranium mining is not really a big industry. I mean, and of course, the company I'm working for is actually working on removing mining entirely because we want to use the waste as fuel. But just in general, uranium mining doesn't have a lot of power. So the groups that lobby for nuclear, the only groups that make money off of it are utilities. And utilities also own gas plants, coal plants, solar, wind, And so like nuclear doesn't have very strong lobbying. And that's partially because the groups that the lobbying groups for nuclear can't really say like nuclear energy is clean energy because they don't want to say coal energy is not clean. They can say nuclear energy is clean energy. They just can't say we should shut down coal plants because they're paid by utility groups that also have coal plants. So it's like it's a weird place to be in terms of lobbying. Honestly, like I know I have some weird, like the main thing that I would write if I wanted to support nuclear would be like maybe I don't know if I would do a price on carbon because that tends to impact the poor more, disproportionately impact poor people. And so, but having something that would, that would ultimately make everybody pay for their waste, make every industry pay for their waste, would be the thing that I would write. That would be the thing that matters the most. I think actually like nuclear, why I'm saying that is because I think it's important that nuclear compete in a fair market, and it would like do so well like if it was a fair market where everybody like had the same safety expectations, had the same paying for your regulator, paying for your waste. Like nuclear would do so much better because it requires very little materials. I think that the most important thing in terms of destigmatizing nuclear is honestly having a large grassroots movement where people talk about nuclear. And it's not an easy solution. It's one that you have to just have a lot of one-on-one personal conversations with people. And that's a really hard thing to do, but it is happening, and that's really encouraging. So
MSU Class of 2070. We hope that the City of Bozeman and businesses like MSU have been supporting bold nuclear policies, and they don't feel the same sort of existential threat of a potentially unlivable future that we do. In 2021, the historical problems with nuclear energy of waste management, large water requirements, extractive mining, and potential danger of explosions have largely been remedied. The proudly held mission of a land-grant institution, and stated in Land-Grant Universities for the Future by Gavazi and Guy, is that the notion of the university is a covenant and bilateral bond that exists between the land-grant institution and the communities they were designed to serve. The main ideology undergirding this narrative imagines a university that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. The mutually beneficial relationship between a land-grant institution and the greater public good, seen explicitly in the terms of the array of benefits derived by the community stakeholders and society itself, should guarantee that these precious resources, properly stewarded, will never be in danger of perishing from this earth. To live up to this mission would mean participating in some of the most promising options for carbon neutrality starting now, in 2021. This can be shown in many ways. MSU could outwardly express support for nuclear energy policy, encourage students to take part in nuclear research, even invest in nuclear energy itself. We also want to emphasize that successful implementation of nuclear energy policies and infrastructure in Bozeman will be ones that are in direct communication with Native people and prioritize the needs of people most impacted by climate change and most typically left out of policymaking, minorities and those of lower economic status. MSU has a role in facilitating this as well. MSU can uplift and center voices of BIPOC students, especially in conversations about climate action, and how MSU can be held accountable in combating climate change. There is so much potential for a livable future. We expect nuclear to be a part of it and hope we are reaping the benefits in 2070.